Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1753. The topic is nutrition, and the title is Why You Need High Calorie Days During Fat Loss Diets. So, I'm working with one of my clients. We're going through, with all my clients, sometimes I'll use different verbiage and language depending on different concepts we're talking about, given their history and their knowledge with nutrition or training. So some of the terminologies I'm going to use is like a little bit variable, but it's what works well in that conversation. So my one client, we're doing push phases and then kind of pause phases or holding phases for dieting. And the idea of that is if you lower your calories, you have really high demand of exercise, that can cause physical fatigue accumulation over time, over a couple weeks. Physical fatigue combined with life stress is going to wear you out mentally. So it's good to kind of do those pushes in phases. So we might bring the calories down, we increase the volume of the exercise. It doesn't mean I make them, go in the gym any longer. They don't have to do, hours of fasted cardio or anything like that. We're just going to pick exercise selection and workout structures that allow for overall greater caloric usage. So we'll do that with the training to some degree. We'll reduce our caloric intake to some degree, but we get an aggressive deficit. We'll push, and then whenever the person feels like, I'm getting kind of worn out, I'm tired, or maybe they start having some really strong cravings. So we might do it for a certain period of time. Maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 8 weeks, maybe it's 12 weeks. Kind of depends on what that person's used to and how their body reacts. Well, after that push phase, we'll bring them up to closer to caloric maintenance, maybe a slight deficit. And then we just try to hold our weight for a little bit. And then I usually bring down the volume in their training, and we aim to just kind of hold their weight. So maybe they start a push phase at 160, we get down to 150, and then during the hold phase, maybe the 160 to 150, it took, let's say, 12 weeks. And then we're gonna, and that, you might say, is wow, only 10 pounds in 12 weeks, but they might have been building muscle the whole time. Maybe they're new to a push phase, so it wasn't as super intense. But we'll use that as an example. 12 weeks, they're getting mentally tired, a little bit, fatigued. Everything else is going on in their life. So we say, okay, well, let's do a hold phase of 4 weeks, where we just try to hold our weight at 150. We're not trying to get it down. We certainly don't want to go up. We just want to hold it at 150. We might do that for 4 weeks. They say they're feeling a lot better and they want to push again. So we go ahead and we go into that aggressive deficit. Now, when you go through those phases, one component that we track is the average caloric intake for the week. And I know that if the average caloric intake for the week is progressively getting lower, that body weight will adjust and the person will lose weight. The catch to this is I don't want them to eat the same amount of calories every day. So maybe our weekly average is 1,500 calories. I don't want them to eat 1,500 calories every single day. Part of the reason is there's a better way to do it. If you have training days and non-training days, you have days where you expend greater energy and days you expend less energy. It's better to do what's called caloric cycling, which is maybe on training days, they're going to eat up to 1,700. On non-training days, we might keep it really low at 1,300. And that average is 1,500. But it allows us to have more food on the days we're more active, less food on the days we're less active, and it better matches their hunger level, better matches their energy needs. So we play around a lot with calories to where they are going to be variable per day, as it just helps a better experience. So rather than having a set number, say 1,500 every day, then on training days they're super severe deficit. They're going to get hunger cravings. Their body's going to start fighting that process faster and more aggressively. Then on the days they weren't active, they didn't work out, and they're going to eat that same 1,500 calories. It's almost like the body gets a day off in the sense to where it wasn't as aggressive of a deficit. They may recover a little bit from some of the aggressive deficit on the training day, but there's still an accumulation of issues, an accumulation of body annoyance that's happening from the extreme deficit on the training days, and then the not so extreme deficit on the non-training days. On those days, it's almost like it's a wasted effort because you could have pushed a little harder into a deficit and not had as much of a deficit on that training day, which would spark the mental stress, the physical stress. So if we vary the calories to better match the caloric usage, the person feels better through the process, and they can usually do the push phase for longer. So typically if somebody tries a really aggressive diet and within 3-4 weeks they burn out, one of the problems could be is they tried to eat the exact same number of calories every single day regardless of their activity, and that caused some really extreme days. Whereas if you vary the calories, you might be able to get that person to last 8 weeks before they feel like they have to step back to let their body recover. Now, through that concept, one of my clients, we're in the middle of a push phase now, and I wanted to give you some idea of the numbers and stuff that we're going for, and give the promotion of the idea that you do need some high days. Her calories are set up where she has 2 training days a week. She trains 5 days a week. So 2 days a week, she's going to eat between 1,600 to 1,700 calories. Now, she's been tracking for a really long time, so for her to get within 100 calorie range is doable for sure. And then we have a bunch of other elements that we track as well, which I will share here. But this is a level of somebody tracking things that has been doing this for a while. This is not a starter level. I would not have somebody who's new to tracking calories do it as precisely as this client is. This makes sense. If somebody's been doing this thing for 5 years, they're going to have a lot more experience with it. They're going to be able to do more nuancy things than somebody who's only been doing it for 5 days, right? So their calories on 2 training days is 1,600 to 1,700 calories. On the other training days is 1,300 to 1,400 calories. And then non-training days is actually 1,200 to 1,300 calories. Now that's pretty low. It's aggressive. Their weekly average turns out to be 1,407, so 1,407. Now, this is helping them lose weight. They are losing weight, and what's nice is they're still getting stronger, and they're getting bigger muscles in certain areas, the areas that we've been focusing. When we originally started working together, she was having some hip shifting in her squat that was causing some hip pain, and issues like that. She said that she felt very soft, even though she was training really hard, and she had a history of kind of severely under-eating to try to lose weight, but then she had no energy. Nothing really seemed to happen. She seemed to plateau. But then when she would try to increase her calories to be quote-unquote healthy, she would gain a bunch of fat. So she was just chronically under-eating, and it was just a super challenge. So our goal to work together was not only to lose body fat, but we wanted to fix the strength issues, and we wanted to increase muscle definition. Now, we have fixed the strength issues. She's already hit a squat PR, best ever, without any hip shift, and we're working on the deadlift and the bench press now because she likes those kind of main kind of lifts. Now, she's gotten a lot more muscle definition. Absolutely, way more muscle definition. The arms, the shoulders, her ab lines are much cleaner. The fat on the side of the thighs has gone down a lot, and the glute is getting more of a rounded pop look to it. So very, very happy with all that. So definitely making progress other than just on the scale, which is very important to know. And that's why I have a lot of my clients do DEXA scans or in-body scans, because that gives us even more data of body composition rather than just using a weight scale. But those are her calories. If you remember, the calorie ranges were 1600 to 1700, 1300 to 1400, and 1200 to 1300. Now, we have other things. We're tracking protein, we're tracking sugar, we're tracking actually daily fat intake. I wanted her to have greater carbohydrates throughout the day rather than fats. So I have a limiter on her fat intake, so it forces her to get used to eating carbs, and that's going to give her better energy. There's a lot of benefits to that, digestion-wise as well. So those are some things that we're tracking. Now, when I go through and I look at my clients' data, I do this every single week, is I'll go through their tracking app, and like, for example, August 1st, she had 1,599 calories, 39 grams of fat, 26 grams of sugar, and 152 grams of protein. Then July 31st, she had 1,179 calories, 39 grams of fat, 13 grams of sugar, and 124 grams of protein. So I go through and actually write that all down. And what I noticed was on July 28th, she had 1,468 calories. Now, that was a training day, but that's actually in between our windows. Our training day windows are either 1,300 to 1,400 or 1,600 to 1,700. So 1468, I wrote to her, I said, this is kind of like a tween day. We're 68 calories over the 1,400 mark, which isn't significant. It's not something we would want to do regularly, but you do a great job with your macros, so nothing for us to worry about, meaning that she's very consistent. So one random day here or there where she's a little high, it's not a big deal. However, if it was meant to be one of the 1,600 to 1,700 days, then being over 100 calories below that window is not something we want. We do want that high calorie day. I went through, I checked a couple other days, and then there was another day on the 24th where she had 1,534. And I wrote again, this is another tween day. If we're going for the 1,600 to 1,700 range, we do really want to be over 1,600. I'm assuming that it can feel counterproductive to have high days, but it's necessary so that we can have low days. We want to have the low days to shock the body into dumping body fat, but then the higher days to prevent the body from protecting against the next low day. It's like a one step back, two steps forward concept. However, and I put in large caps and bold, however, our high days are not a step back. They're more like a pause/recovery day. You are not gaining body fat on those days. Again, I wrote in all caps. So you don't have to fear them. And then I said, sorry for the all caps, haha, but I wanted to be sure to explain the concept, but without the fear of the high days being counterproductive. I said, overall, you're doing great work, and I'm super happy for you. So this is something that we had struggled with before in a push phase in the past, is she was fearful of her higher days, so she missed the high calorie days, and then she kind of mentally crashed and burned in the push phase, and we didn't make it, all the way through. So this is something we want to pay attention to, is if the program calls for high days, we absolutely need to have those days. One of the things I tell clients all the time is, if it wouldn't be in your best interest, I wouldn't have written it. So if it's in your program, please ask me questions, 1,000,000%. That's why every client has an online journal. Every client has a Google Doc that is their journal. They can write in it 24/7. I check the document. I try to do it at least every 5 days. So I try to do it at least once a week, if not twice a week, where I get kind of commenting to them. But on average, I hit about every 4 to 5 days. I'm responding back to people. So they can write in anything they want. Then they have my number. They can always text me if they need something that's more urgent than a couple days. But they can ask any question they want, and I will always answer. Always, always, always. The challenge, though, is if somebody doesn't tell me what they're thinking, if they don't ask the question, and maybe they're fearful of the high day and they just skip the high day, and it's like, hey, we got to get that in. We got to do that. That's part of the process. The high days are the recovery days, so that way I can push us even harder on those low days, and we can get a greater burn of body fat. by allowing those low days to be enough of a shock that the body isn't already precautious, like it hasn't already set up the defenses, against that low day. So it does do better in diets when you're trying to lose body fat to have high, medium, low days, at least high, low days, and you do need the high days because they help ensure that the process of the diet doesn't crash and burn too quickly due to physical and mental stress, and they help make sure that we get greater progress at a higher weekly caloric average because the body is not as protective against body fat by having those extreme highs and lows. So it's very important, and I do encourage you to do what's called caloric cycling as any part of a fat loss diet, so that way you can actually have greater caloric intake during that process. Now, we have podcasts that can help to kind of learn more about that. We have podcast 857, which is a nutrition podcast titled Caloric Cycling to Breakthrough Plateau. And that would be actually if you want to gain weight or lose weight. So that's pretty good. You can find that podcast, again, podcast 857. You can go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com. We have a podcast player on our website. Underneath the player is instructions on how to find older podcasts, such as podcast 857. Golly. So podcast 857, Nutrition, Caloric Cycling to Breakthrough Plateau. Okay, so I wanted to share that, just a little bit of data, a little bit of fun story about what one of my clients is going through. Make sure you have your highs and lows days. Make sure you can actually do your diet for as long as you need to and not feel entirely miserable throughout the process. If you're looking for any help with coaching, we do have a bunch of services you can check out on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. If you have any questions, if you need anything, let me know. My email is brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.